So I would like to start addressing all the three speakers. So we know this was a really interesting panel when the different archives. What can we know from the archives? And we know Derrida's archive fever, right? So I was wondering if you could reflect on the fact that you are analyzing the archives of the power. So the institutions which have the power, so how does that influence the knowledge we gain, the stories you get, the different frameworks you actually set up after that, and what kind of methodological challenges are there? So that would be my first launching question. So who would like to start? Thank you. And then the others, oh, there is one question there. Any other? Maybe we have got 15 minutes. Wait. There is another question here. So why don't you answer, and then we will continue with several other questions. Fantastic.
Good. I will be very brief because it's a great question. With my students, I usually give them 3 or 4 books about the Holocaust in the East of different authors of different countries, because this is where as well you see that it depends of your language with what kind of documents you're working. So I give them to read Peter Longerich, Itzhak Arad, and someone of the American authors, Richard Rhodes or Bjorn. And you see in the writing, it depends of which language you have. So the Germans are, of course, working a lot with German materials and sometimes even trusting it more than others and saying, oh, KGB stuff, ooh, bad investigation, violent, we don't trust it. And same thing when it comes to Eastern researchers. They might say, German material, I don't have access to it. So if you want to finish it, if you want to write the history of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe, you need to speak, 20 languages to write the perfect book, to be able to get all the information.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. It's a question for the conference, I think. So it will be a huge conference for 3 days at least. Briefly to say, yes, of course, every institution has its own political agenda. It's selbstverständlich. Everybody understands that NKVD, GPU, KGB had their own agenda, but what I see, question of the Holocaust, Jewish question, especially questions like less interested, like Karaite question, were not focal point of these structures. It was question, they had to provide these trials, but and I agree with Andrew that of course we have to read to compare these sources and remember weak sides of this any of this document.
Well, basically, I agree with both of you. The best thing to do, if possible, is to juxtapose, and no one can be trusted completely. I'm talking about both witnesses and the agencies that interrogated them. This is a very complex story because a huge number of people disappeared just like that, and there's relatively few traces. And this is a huge challenge, of course.
Mm-hmm. And most of them were women and children. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So here, Struve, and then at the back. So why don't you start, Struve, and then at the back?
Yes, thank you very much for the 3 very interesting presentations. I have only one very specific question to Kirill. Maybe you could say could you say something more about the publication activities of the extraordinary commission? The question, or the background of my question is that I always was looking, or could not find a published version of the report of the Commission for the city of Lviv. There seems to have been published only a report for the oblast. Is that typical? Did they report? Is there a kind of systematic in it, or is it rather by coincidence what happened?
Thank you. And there is a question at the back, and then can you just
Maybe it makes sense to answer to this question.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes?
Yes.
As you like. У меня одна ремарка и по одному вопросу к двум из докладчиков. Ремарка следующая. Кроме перечисленных, и сегодня очень хорошо, что во время одной панели были собраны доклады, посвященные разным источникам послевоенного или, скажем так, постфактумного анализа данных, допросы ЧГК и допросы КГБ или НКВД того времени, и то, как работали в Люксембурге, это очень хорошо. Хочу указать, просто, может быть, присутствующим это интересно, на четвертый источник. Это так называемая комиссия Минца, комиссия по изучению Второй мировой войны, Великой Отечественной войны, которая была, комиссия историков, которая была создана вскоре после войны или даже в конце еще войны, сейчас на память не помню. И материалы ее лежат в архиве Института российской истории в Москве. Это ценный, важный источник, в котором иногда часто пересекаются допрашиваемые или опрашиваемые. И тут нет такого жанра неприятного, как допрос в случае других источников советских, российских. Но вот я с этим столкнулся и увидел в случае команды операции 1005, насколько это важный источник. Я не знаю, кто-то переводит?
Yeah.
Переводит или нет?
Yeah,
Мгм.
Andrei, I mean, I think that's the right way that you summarize, and then there will be a response. And
Yeah, so Pavel just indicated that, of course, there.
Нет, не респонс, это реплика, не надо какого респонса, да.
Exactly, it's a replic that, like Pavel said, there are much more different sources, like the Minsk archive that is located in Moscow right now, and that has as well interesting material. And Pavel's question was.
It was not a question, it was my remark. My questions are following.
Okay.
okay, so can you just,
Yes.
if can you raise the
Yes, yes.
question in English? We would appreciate
Two
it.
short questions.
Yeah.
First question for the Pan Radchenko. Let me speak Russian, if possible.
Okay, Andrei, be ready.
Скажите, пожалуйста, а есть или у историков, или у СБУшников, или там КГБшников какой-то словарь этих самых акронимов, псевдонимов? Вот, например, если я встречаю в газете «Украинское слово» статью, подписанную ПП, есть ли источник или есть ли историк, который может мне помочь определить, кто этот ПП? Это вопрос к вам. А вопрос к Андрею Уманскому такой. Я не совсем уловил связь тех фотографий, которые вы показали в конце с Людвигсбургом. Может быть, я пропустил какое-то звено. И, в принципе, наверное, вы себе отдаете отчет в том, что последняя из новелл, которую вы по этим, видимо, это как-то комментарий к этим фотографиям, будучи примененной к военнопленным, была бы поразительна и нетипична, и малореалистична. Речь идет, скорее всего, о команде или еврейских военнопленных и политруков. Больше ни о какого другого такого случая я бы себе не мог представить, чтобы это было достоверно. Спасибо.
So the first question is for Yuri, is if there is a list of acronyms that is used, for example, in Ukrainian newspapers during World War II, when there are just acronyms, and do we know what authors are behind it? And the other question is in relationship to the photos I showed, that the prisoners of war are certainly Jewish.
Okay, this is the last moment to ask questions, because then quickly, right?
There were 40,000 people in Gestapo. All of them survived the war. They did not fight on the front. There were 1 million men in SS. There were hundreds of thousands of SD people. All of them made it to West Germany after the war. The German government surely interrogated all of them, so they have the whole picture of what happened here. How come that 75 years after all of it, we still have no idea about what happened, who did it, how they did it? The German government
you.
knows it. Why wouldn't they tell us about it? Why do you go to the archives and go to their archives? Why don't they tell you this?
Okay, thank you. So this is your chance to respond. Yeah.
My chance to respond. I try to use it. So, first of all, such list doesn't exist. One list, and no way. What do you mean one list? Один список. You can imagine one list for even one paper, newspaper. No, such research, could be done. For instance, I try to analyze all these acronyms, pseudonyms in Nova Ukraina in Kharkiv. If you're interested, I can, submit such list. But for Ukrainske Slovo, I have not seen. And SBU, KGB, I do not sure that we were interested to find such huge list.
Why don't you pass the mic to Kirill to respond to the question?
Your question. It's difficult to establish a method in Commission policy what to publish and what not to publish. They were definitely driven by political exigencies that existed at that time. But there were, of course, some high-profile cases that could not be ignored, for example, Kyiv. In all other cases, Kyiv was, after all, the biggest city the Germans ever captured. So it was, simply a big case with probably the highest number of casualties. But all other cases are, it's very difficult. For their publication, they publish two sets of documents called, in 43 and 45, called the Documents Accused. And there were also publications in central media, central newspapers, lengthy reports by this commission. Well, it was not, it's more about politics, what to publish and what not to publish, when to publish. So, in order to get to get an understanding about the area you're looking for, you should actually consult every newspaper, central newspaper that was released at that time, to the best of my understanding.
Thank you. Andrei, would you like to respond to this question? Why you need to have to go to the archive to do research? Thank you.
Tomorrow. I was there, in Ludwigsburg, I don't know, hundreds of times. It's a great archives here, but you're totally right. The thing is that it was like amnesia. Nobody knew anything suddenly. And if you see, when it comes to the Einsatzgruppen, and again, the case that Christian was talking about, the prosecutors are asking the defendants, how were the Einsatzgruppen built, how it worked, who did the orders. They had, at the beginning, no material at all. So, and this is what I tried to stress in an article that I wrote 10 years ago, comparing Soviet Commission and the Zentrale Stelle. They were writing history, actually. They did the work for us.
I'm sorry,
totally
order.
Agree.
How many amnesias is it going to be? In 1960, there was a
totally-
revolution in Germany. They changed
totally
the
agree.
Sorry, can you do this discussion after we finish the session? Thank you.
So just to finish, this is why the prosecutor and the German policeman did for us historians a great job assembling all the material, all the documents from different military archives, and asking all those questions to the defendants, with which we can, for example, what we saw today from Martin's presentation, establish what happened in Babi Yar, thanks to these depositions.
Yeah, please add something.
To add something to what Andrei has said, we also have a lot of material from Ludwigsburg in Yad Vashem, because Yad Vashem receives Holocaust-related material from this archive. And I read a lot from this source. And my feeling is that overwhelmingly German witnesses in these trials, in these proceedings, had excellent memory. They extremely often they remembered what they did, where their unit was stationed at this specific day. The only thing they failed to remember almost always what they were doing at that day. And they remembered what they did a day before and the day after, and maybe problems of historical memory, somehow they failed to remember what's happened to them on this specific day, but they remembered with a high degree of the precision that they were not at that site. So with the exception of these personal circumstances, this is an excellent source.
Thank you. I think that's a fantastic closing to think about how the legal structures actually facilitating forgetting, and how this forgetting is, of course, a gendered amnesia. So please join me to thank for the panelists for the fantastic presentation. And we have got a bus waiting for us at to the hotel.
Just perhaps a quick remark. The idea, of course, is so not to have the conference as well sliding into amnesia, is as well to publish the presentations and in a conference book with all the articles. So this is the idea, the plan that we had. Thank you very much.